Hello from Buckingham Palace. I'm LaFlamme on special assignment for CityNews. Tonight, the late Queen Elizabeth is back in her home behind me, where she lived, raised her children, worked, and waved from that famous balcony. After her farewell to Scotland, this week of final journeys ends where she reigned. The cortege carrying the Queen's coffin made a sentimental journey back to Buckingham Palace, her home since she was a little girl. Thousands welcomed the woman mourned as a nation's grandmother. The rain-soaked streets along the Mall rolled out like a red carpet. The new king was there to meet his mother's coffin. Earlier in the day, duty brought on by her death took Charles to the four nations of his new kingdom, a complicated mix of emotions with condolences to the family for their loss and a celebration for a new king.
God save the king! God save the king!
In Northern Ireland, sympathies had added significance. Queen Elizabeth became the first monarch to visit the independent state in 2011, beginning a speech in Dublin Castle with words in Irish. The following year, another powerful gesture of reconciliation, a handshake with the Deputy Prime Minister, a former IRA commander.
My mother felt deeply, I know, the significance of the role she herself played in bringing together those whom history had separated, and in extending a hand to make possible the healing of long-held hurts.
Inside Hillsborough Castle, Republicans reached out to Charles, still a son in mourning.
She played a great role here in terms of reconciliation and building peace, so it's the end of an era for sure.
But the nuances remained unspoken as the king met with political leaders both loyal to the UK and not. Certainly those in this crowd favor the crown. Thousands are waiting already for when the Queen lies in state at Westminster Hall beginning tomorrow.
I'm having 1,001 emotions, but the plan is that I will take off my hat, look, say a little prayer, and I wear the hat back and wave a final goodbye.
The return to London was on a Royal Air Force flight from Edinburgh, accompanied by her only daughter, Princess Anne, with her in the last days of her life. In preparation for tomorrow's procession to Parliament, members of the British Armed Forces rose before dawn to rehearse down to the second.
Her Majesty was our Colonel-in-Chief, our sovereign, and we have the strongest bond with her.
They want to get it right for the woman who was their boss for so long.
It is our opportunity, our last opportunity, to do a duty for the Queen. It's our first opportunity to do a duty for the King.
Every minute of every day since the Queen died has been written in stone to the last detail for decades, including the fact that tomorrow at exactly 2:22 p.m. the cortege will leave Buckingham Palace behind me and head to Westminster Hall, where the lying in state will begin. Today I spoke with royal historian Helen Carr about the well-rehearsed blueprint playing out all around us.
Obviously, famously, the death of the Queen was Operation London Bridge, and then there was all sorts of various code words depending on where she died, depending on the method of transporting her body. There are so many. I mean, the fact that she died at Balmoral Castle was Operation Unicorn. And then there was, further workings out as to whether she was going to be transported by train and met by the Prime Minister and members of the royal family at St Pancras, or whether she was going to be flown down. So they've obviously chosen the latter.
Faith was so important to her. What do you suggest would be the most important message she would have wanted to convey on her funeral?
Togetherness, I think. Unity, togetherness. She was a war child. Blitz spirit was something that was hugely important to her, which is something that we saw when she made the address to the nation with the coronavirus pandemic.
We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return.
This idea of we will meet again, this idea of we will come back together again, I think she would have been moved by the outpouring of public grief. I wonder if she would have been surprised by it. I think perhaps not. I think she knew she was loved.
Is there anything you've learned as an expert about her that you didn't know?
Yeah, she always talked about sort of wanting to be a farmer's wife. You know, how wrong should she have been? Yet she did such a fantastic job, and I think she, you know, went into the role with grace and decorum, which is something she lived by.
So now we have King Charles. What do you think this transition is going to look like?
I think Charles is filling some very big shoes. I think it's a tough job for him. You know, she cultivated 70 years of respect, and she didn't step a foot wrong. That's something that keeps coming up. She did not step a foot wrong. And Charles, historically, his reputation has been somewhat contentious, whether fairly or unfairly. So he has some work to do with that, and I think he will try his best to follow his mother's example, and I think he will. But it's just whether it's how the public receive him in that manner.
We watched Prince William and Harry come together with their wives. Is that reunion lasting?
I think they're coming together at the loss of a matriarch. I think she was hugely important in both of their lives. That's evident. I think the way that both princes speak about their grandmother is full of love, and she was very joyful, and I think that especially with the death of their mother, she filled a big role for them, and I think she was a very maternal figure for them. So I do think that this loss will have brought them together.
And historian Helen Carr will be with me for the Queen's state funeral to help guide us through what's being described on a historic and security level as unprecedented.